Welcome to the New Churches Podcast. My name is Noah Oldham, and in this season, we are tackling all the how-to questions of church planting. And in the church planting world, we hear a lot about vision casting. So to help us tackle a few questions around this subject, I have a couple of great leaders with me today. We've got Adam Muhtaseb, who planted Redemption City Church in Baltimore, and we've got Tony Merida, who planted Imago Dei Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. Brothers, it's good to be with you today.
Yeah.
Dude, Noah.
Man, what a subject, vision casting, so much that could be said around it. But first question right out of the gate, what is vision and how do we cast it? Adam, let's start with you, man.
Yeah, vision is a God-sized horizon in the distance that captures our hearts and demands our lives. It's a future that is so incredible that we can't help but leverage all our resources and all our time and all our lives to see God bring it to life. It's Walt Disney looking at a swamp in Florida and saying, what if this became the greatest place on earth? It's Nehemiah saying, what if we rebuilt this wall and became a nation again? It's Jesus saying, what if every tribe, tongue, and nation was gathered around the throne of God and worshiped together in unity? It's an incredible future that we were willing to die for.
That's really good.
And here's what a lot of people don't realize, like the point of life isn't to avoid suffering, it's to find something worth suffering for. And vision is like, I'll suffer for that.
That's good.
That's really good. Yeah, I often say that vision is a compelling picture of an intended future.
That's good.
That as a church planter, you're not only telling people what the future looks like, but you're compelling them forward in that. I love the way that Vance Pittman talks about spiritual vision. He said it's not the man of God going up on the mountain like in the Old Testament, getting the tablets and coming down and delivering it to the people, but instead it is God's leaders showing the people of God the activity of God and then telling them how they can get in on it. It's God's picture, his compelling picture of his intended future, and us just inviting people to be a part of that.
Yeah, I love what you guys are saying, and I think maybe one step down from that would be mission. And sometimes these two they're more conflated together. But I'm thinking here about the Great Commission, and what we're trying to drive people to is what does the Great Commission faithfulness look like in this context?
That's good.
Or another way to ask it is, what would it look like if the gospel bore fruit here?
Yes.
And what is that future reality? That we would have a church. We would have a church that would bless the poor. We'd have a church that was doing this. Like you begin to see that vision. So for me, you often get to the vision part that you guys are describing by starting with the Great Commission and thinking from that foundation. What does it look like in this context? If the gospel really took off here, what would that vision look like?
Yeah, what's the future of this church plant going to look like? If what God has called us to do here, be disciples who make more disciples, what will this city look like in 10 years, 20 years?
Yeah, rooted in Scripture, but like shaped by our context.
That's really good.
And I think that's what's going to make every church unique is we have unique context.
Yeah.
Same gospel, same Great Commission, same command to go make disciples. But the Lord puts on your heart, on your mind, a vision of what it would look like if the gospel took root here.
And then I think even another step further, Tony, is the kind of people that God has placed in that church plant, that church planter, his collective team, and the passions, the specific passions and gifts he's given them.
100.
Now, all of a sudden, there's a lot of things a church could do, but what is God going to do uniquely through that church as they, as disciples, make disciples like them?
I think where your passions and your skills and the city's need all meet is a great start.
Yes.
For
Excellent.
vision.
Yep.
And vision is where we're going, that distant horizon. Mission is how we're going to get there.
That's right.
So our vision is we want to be a church planting movement fueled by the gospel that reaches Baltimore City and cities around the world. So what if there were 100 churches started from our church in the next 50 years? That's a horizon. How are we going to get there?
Yeah.
Display and declare the gospel. We show the gospel with our lives and we declare it with our mouths. So those are the two distinctions that I use to kind of give clarity to our church.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good. So we talked about what vision is. Now, how do you cast it?
Yeah.
We use that verb with it, casting vision. What does that look like, Tony?
So I think one thing you're doing as a church planter when you're preaching, or maybe you're in a core team, whatever the setting is, when you're all gathered together, is that you want to there may be some weeks where that's all you're talking about is the vision for your church. But more often what you're going to do, especially as you get more established, is you start dripping the vision of your church regularly, weekly. I think that's way better than just doing a vision sermon once a year, which, again, you can do, and I've done that. But the idea of people cannot help but to hear what you're about if they show up on any Sunday.
That's right.
And so I think the dripping method is more effective than the fire hose method. And people can't avoid it when you're doing it like that. When they know you're doing the once a year vision talk, they can kind of duck and wait till you get back to what you normally do. Yeah. But when you're dripping it, what you're doing is really creating culture, and you're helping people to hear the language and know it so well they can communicate it to others. And I think that's when you know it's really caught, is when people start using your language and start speaking the terms that you're speaking and sharing it with others. And so I think the only way to do that is they need to hear it a lot. So high level, is from the stage, leadership. But then I also think just the need to celebrate your vision when things happen that are reinforcing the vision. Make a big deal about that.
You replicate what you celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how I say it.
And evaluate all of your ministries. So you're always celebrating and evaluating. And those are critical. I think people need a plan, and so it's like what Adam said there about the mission. Giving us the pathway to accomplish vision. If they only hear high level vision, but they never have a way to grab hold of it and participate in it, they get frustrated or tune you out. So we got to have on-ramps for people to, how do you get in on this, right? And then just the final thing I would say is the need to, as a leader, influence other influencers in your church, to identify the people who have real sway. They have their leaders, their small group leaders, their influencers. You're meeting with them, so again, they're mini vision casters of your church, that you don't need to feel the weight of carrying all of that yourself. So I would spend a lot of time with those who can shape other individuals.
That's really good.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to also just mention that really everyone comes to your church with their own vision.
Yeah.
They have their own, Bonhoeffer would say, like, wish stream of, like, what this church is going to give me. And it's your job as the lead planner to clarify, this is our vision. This is our mission. These are our values. This is where we're going. That's why I created something called a culture guide that puts all that on paper.
It's excellent.
And when somebody, like, is going off from who we are, I just, like, gently say, like, hey, I love that. This is just who we are. And if this aspect of ministry or life is super important to you, like you want a MAGA church, like that's just not us. That's not our vision. We're not going to have the American flag on stage. Like, it's just not going to happen. We love America, but this church though might be great for that for you. But we don't like. I'm not afraid to say, like, this might not be the church for you. And the vision and the mission and the values clarifies that, so people don't like gain influence and then create division. And to your point, Tony, I would just add, like, don't use the Bible to create a vision. Let the Bible use you to create a vision. Like, I was a member of Tony's church, and I just so distinctly remember we would just go verse by verse through the Bible, and he would preach on orphan care, and he would say, what if we did this? What if we took the Bible and made it alive here? And I was like, hey, I want to do that. And I never cared about orphan care more than when I was at Tony's church. Because he's just preaching through the Bible and applying it to our lives. So you can just preach the Bible and apply it.
And one of the things, if I could just add on that, one of the things I've seen through the years is you may have this biblical vision, say for orphan care, but you don't know how to do it. This is where you can really lean on your people. And I did this in before we planted in Mississippi, where I was preaching through James, got to 127, and I said, I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't have next steps. All I know is we need to be doing something. So I want you guys to go home this week and pray, talk. That's good. And let's meet together, those who are interested, and let's strategize about how we can practice James 127. And we did. I mean, they came back with a fundraising plan. Sending shoes to orphans, an adoption fund. I mean, it was all sorts of things. So I learned in that moment. I was very young then, very old now. Just, you don't have to have all the answers. I think what we're leading with the word. And we also obviously need to lead by example. Leading with a plan may not always be something that you have, but you can cast that vision and get to the plan. But the component that I feel really responsible for, one is teaching the scriptures.
Yeah.
And then secondly, modeling the vision.
Yeah.
If I'm talking about orphan care or whatever it is, and I don't have a vested interest in it personally, there's something very inauthentic about that.
Yeah.
It's not compelling.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you got to adopt a bunch of kids necessarily, but it does mean you're somehow engaged in this activity and you're willing to sacrifice for it. So I think the leader leads really well when the vision is clear, it's biblical, but it's also embodied. In the leader.
It's really good. You talked about dripping the vision in language throughout. I would also add to that, I think there are times you can splash the vision everywhere.
That's good.
So one of the things that church planners do really well at, I've noticed compared to often established churches, is the vision is everywhere in a compelling way. You're building branding for the first time. Put your vision in that branding so people can see it.
Yeah.
Part of our vision was to litter St. Louis with gospel-centered missional churches. And Luke 10:2 was our vision verse. And so we used harvest imagery in so many things. We had an urban background with corn stalks coming up for people to see we're going to harvest that city. And it always put the vision in front of people, so they never had to guess, what's this church about?
Yeah.
You knew we were about church planting.
Yeah.
In fact, so much so that people come to St. Louis and say, I want to check out a church that's into church planting because I want to be involved.
Yeah.
They'd be like, you got to talk to August Gate because that's what they're all about.
Yep.
And so our swag, our branding, everything that we put out, it was infused and we splashed it everywhere so that you couldn't miss it when you showed up.
Yeah. No, that's excellent, bro.
Yeah.
I think people ought to have a sense of it as soon as they walk through your church doors, wherever you're meeting. They ought to be hearing it from the stage.
Yeah.
They ought to be hearing it in prayers.
Yes.
That's a big component,
Yes.
like what you're actually praying for.
Yes.
So whenever there's a church plant, it's just an obvious, we've been praying for this for a long time.
Yeah.
Those are really, I like that phraseology a lot, the splashing of it as well.
Well, we often hear planners talk about writing the vision and values of the plant. What advice would you have on writing these things, on determining what they are, writing them down in order to communicate them?
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about vision. Let me talk about values for a second.
Yeah.
Values are tied to the vision because they are the behaviors that you teach, celebrate, and tolerate
Okay.
on the journey to that horizon.
Say that one more time.
Values are the behaviors you teach, celebrate, and tolerate on the way to that vision, that horizon. I actually think Patrick Lencioni's the book, The Advantage, is really helpful because it clarifies like how an organization creates mission, vision, values. And he talks about 3 categories of values. There's permission to play values, kind of like when you go to an amusement park and ride a roller coaster, you must be this tall to ride kind of values. Like these are like the basic, like you can't be a part of an organization or especially not leading an organization if you're not a Christian. You don't believe the Bible's God's word. Those are just like permission to play values.
Yeah.
Then there's aspirational values, things that we love and value, but we don't fully embody, right? Like we might value aspirationally diversity, but not be very diverse. So you can't really make that a core value because it's not something that defines your organization, but something you aspire to.
Yeah.
That's good.
And then he finally says that core values are the stuff that your organization does better than 99% of other organizations. The things that like set you apart. The things that you will die on that hill.
Yeah.
Like one example is like Southwest had humor as a value, and somebody complained that a stewardess was joking on the intercom, and they sent an email. They were a loyal customer. They sent an email to the CEO of Southwest like, how dare you joke about something like airline safety? And the CEO responded, we'll miss you. Because they weren't willing to compromise the value of humor to keep a customer.
Wow.
And values are the things that we say like, this is so important to us.
That's really good.
We're willing to lose you before we compromise on these things.
Yeah.
So gospel centrality. It's
good.
Like I'd rather lose somebody than not preach the gospel in every sermon.
Yeah.
On those, it's just defining the attitudes and behaviors that we care about.
That's really good.
It's excellent. I think related to the whole discussion we've had so far, when I think about a vision statement, I want to see, this is very basic, the gospel or God, Jesus. Like I want to make sure that what we're after is something that's honoring to Christ, glorifying to God. It's advancing the gospel. So there are various ways we could write it, and we're all in different contexts, but that's something that I'm I'm especially looking for when I read something. Could this be said at the YMCA or some other organization?
Yeah.
Or is this distinctly a Christian church trying to fulfill the Great Commission?
That's really, really
I
good.
still remember Imago Dei's, Tony's values.
Oh,
Gospel, community, mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And we exist to see lives changed by the gospel. That's been our vision statement since we started.
Yeah.
We want to see lives changed by the gospel. And we still talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
And like, I think our point here is like, you don't have to create new stuff.
Right.
Like, we're actually teaching old stuff. We're trying to make old stuff new, not new stuff old.
Yeah.
So just take what's faithful and clear in the scriptures and make that forefront. This is the stuff we value.
Yeah, I think that I've worked with a number of church planters over the years. My role as Send City missionary for almost a decade in St. Louis. I helped a lot of churches get started, and I've seen a lot of prospectuses. I've seen a lot of vision and value statements. And one of the things I would say is when they're biblical is when it's best. Because if vision is where we're going, mission is how we're going to get there. I think values are the guardrails that keep us on the road of where we're going. And you talked about aspirational, you talked about all these different categories. Sometimes values are just like the pet projects or the pet things that the planter likes or enjoys. And it's not necessarily biblical. It's not necessarily a biblical conviction. Like for us, one of ours was progress. One of our values, our sixth value is progress. And so people knew from the get-go, like, we believe that God is going to transform you. If you're the same person 5 years from now as you are today, like, what we're doing is not working, and you are not leaning in. Truth, willing to fight for that. The only greater value in our church than truth was love. We're going to love you, and we're going to tell you the truth. And so people knew those things, and so we were able to evaluate what we're doing. Are we accomplishing not only the mission, but are we accomplishing the way we believe the Bible is intended for us to accomplish it?
That's good.
I would add to that point, like the gospel, the vision, mission, and values should be so clear and forefront in the organization that the other members of the church can hold you accountable to them.
Yes.
Like, you're not above them.
Yep.
So one of our values is gospel honor.
Yeah.
And if I'm being dishonoring, the lowest person in the org chart should be able to go all the way up to me and say, hey, that wasn't very honoring, and that's not who we are.
Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah.
That keeps you on track. I just kind of broached the subject a second ago by dropping the big P word, prospectus. If you're in church planting very long, you're gonna see a million of these. You're gonna hear about it as a planter's preparing to plant and raise funds and recruit a team and build his prayer supporters. He may have this planting prospectus. What needs to be in this document, and maybe what shouldn't be? What needs to be in it, and what shouldn't be?
The things I put on my prospectus was first my story. Like, the thing that made me unique, like, I'm a Palestinian former Muslim church planter. That just kind of makes me different. I don't know of any other of those. I'm kind of like the unicorn here. Like, not many Palestinian former Muslim guys plant a church in Baltimore. So I just put that on my prospectus. And that really helped with like fundraising, especially guys in the South. Like, a former Muslim, we want to give money to that. The vision, which is like that glorious future you're headed towards. The mission, like how we're going to get there. Values, like the attitudes that will define us along the way. Just a little bit about the city, about the need of the city, why you're going to that place. You don't need to say, like, this is the most unreached place in the world, Birmingham, Alabama. I'm sure it's needy, but like not every place is the most needy place in the world. So just be honest about the need. And then I added, lastly, like references or networks I was affiliated with. So like, hey, we're a Send Network plant. I've been through the assessment. They've affirmed me. I'm being sent by this church. These pastors endorse me. That way, like, the person I'm trying to get to partner with our church kind of has an idea of where I'm coming from, who's influenced me, and
that's really good.
Yeah, I wrote down theological foundation. So what are your beliefs? Mission, vision, we've been talking about. Your context, brief overview. I would just also say there, just don't overdo it. Like, every prospectus I've ever seen, it's like, this is the most desperate place in the world. It's like, okay. I understand your passion, but let's be straight about it and honest and not try to exaggerate. Who's your team? You might include the fact that this is not just me.
There's people coming along.
Coming along.
That's helpful.
They're sacrificing, et cetera. Timeline. You might want to consider that. That's usually a practical question. And then budget, partnership, what are the plans financially. It's helpful. I would say the weakness, not the weakness, but I would just encourage planters not to put too much emphasis and reliance upon a prospectus.
Yes.
Like do it and make it look good and include all the things that are needed. But early on, I've found in a church plant, most people that you're pitching this to are not interested in the name of the church or the prospectus. They're interested in you. And if you don't have relationships with people, then you can have a glossy prospectus and have all of the right stuff, but it goes in the trash.
That is 100%
You
true.
really need to know people. And if they care about you, and you can say, this is what we believe, this is my team, I've been endorsed here, boom, 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 and they know you, then they'll support
In
you.
my experience, it is all relational.
Yep.
And the prospectus is like seal the deal. Like, oh, this guy has his ducks in a row. He kind of has a plan here.
Right.
There's momentum here.
Right.
And this is like the clear, how do you help? Like document.
Yeah.
How do I pray? How do I give? How do I support?
Exactly.
But it is all
I
relationship.
just think about it as a pastor, when people come to me now, like nonprofit orgs, wanting our church to do this or that, I'll listen to their spiel and I'll look at their brochure, but I'm not looking at that brochure usually at all. What I'm paying attention to is that person talking to me. And if they're compelling, and especially if we already have a relationship, then I don't even reference the prospectus.
Yes.
I'm going to the XP, I'm going to whoever's making or missions pastor. Hey, let's have a talk about putting them in the missions budget. Like it all is relational.
Yeah, I would say there's a number of gifts that you need to be a church planter, successful. And a lot of them roll into this ability to cast a compelling vision. I don't think that a prospectus is necessarily a mechanism of casting that. What I mean is a lot of people can put together a nice perspective. They could be a graphic designer and do that. They could use AI to do that. There's all kinds of things. They could borrow somebody else's, but I get prospectuses all the time. And the first thing I do, if I have the time, is I sit it down and I ask them to share with me their heart.
Yeah.
And what I tell church planners to do is you need to have a 30-second pitch, a 3-minute pitch, and a 30-minute pitch.
That's good.
The elevator speech, the small conversation, and then the sermon you can cast in front of an entire church or an elder board or whatever it might be. Because I think the planter should be the walking prospectus. I like how you said that, like you put your story in there. Yeah. And if you shared your story with me, you said, I'm planting a church, I'd love for you to consider partnering with us. You're going to start telling me your story. You're going to tell me about your love for this city. And there's no better way to tell me about your love for Baltimore than you to tell me your love for Baltimore. You're not going to hand me your perspective. Say, well, just read this. It's enough. It'll never be enough.
Yeah. Dude, and to just zoom out for a second, a great prospectus and a great vision starts first with a great vision of God.
Yeah.
Like, it's all relational. It's all people looking at you. Like, if you really believe that God came to this earth, was crucified for you, and then came back to life, and he has then commissioned you to go to where you're going to start a new embassy of his heaven, bro, people are going to give to that. Yeah. People are going to join that. Yeah. And so much more starts right in here of like, I believe God is alive. I believe he's commissioned me. Yeah. I believe he's alive in this city, and I get to be a part of it. Yeah. And when you're casting that vision, don't trash other churches. Like, well, finally, a healthy church in the city. Yeah. You know, you can say, like, I'm joining what God has already been doing, and you get to be a part of this with me. That's the vision.
That's really good.
Yeah, you made me think of something related to the prospectus. I would encourage guys, like your little 3-minute and 30-minute and so on, don't talk too much when you're meeting with people. Have your big ideas, but I've sat in meetings before where guys have come and met with, say, our elders, and they talked nonstop for 30 minutes because they're so passionate about this, and they've got all the things to say, and it was like drinking from a fire hydrant. And I just wanted to say, man, slow down a minute, like. Let us ask you some questions. Yeah. There are times, if you got a stage and you got 30 minutes, yes, go for it. But like if you're in a room, you're meeting across the table, give the big points and then have conversation. Yeah. I think that's so much more helpful.
That's really good.
It's more of I think you'll win more people than doing the fire hose method. So that's my only caveat, I would say.
That's really good. I think you just said something that really sparked this for me. It's not only having I think you have to first have a vision of God, and then you have to have a vision of God's kingdom for your city.
That's right.
I heard Vance Pittman say that he never reads a prospectus until he finds out if this prospectus has a vision for the entire city. And if it doesn't, I'm done.
Yeah.
Because it can't ever be about our one church. It's got to be about God's activity. And God's activity is, he is a lot more concerned with this city than he is just one single church. Those things open and close every day. But his kingdom is advancing in cities among the earth. And so I think it's not only having a vision for a church, but having a bigger vision for a city. And did you experience that when you came and you planted Imago Dei? Like, what were you thinking? Were you thinking just one church? What were you thinking?
So we took Rick Warren's peace plan and gave an edit to it, but P was plant churches. So it was on the back of our T-shirts, week 1 of our church plant. Like, we're here to plant more churches. E, evangelize the world. A, aid the poor and the sick. C, care for orphans and the oppressed. E, equip leaders. And so it was immediately multiplication. We're not here for ourselves. We're not here to build a kingdom. We're not here to be a cooler church than the church down the street. We want to be a church planting church, and we want to scatter communities of light all across the world with healthy gospel preaching churches.
Yeah, and people want to give their life to a mission and vision greater than themselves. Like, if you would just boldly cast an incredible vision. Like, life's more than the American Infinity Stones of like a hot body and like a fat 401k.
American Infinity Stones.
Like, life is about partnering with God to do what he's already doing in the world. And if you can boldly cast that, man, people will leverage their entire lives to join you in it. I've seen it.
Yeah. Let me ask this question. So Imago Dei, 14 years ago, August Gate planted 16 years ago, and Redemption City 7.5 years ago. You being the youngest of the planters, not only in age but also in length of church establishment, has the vision changed at all, or are you still running on the same tracks?
Same thing I wrote in my living room when I was in seminary.
Man, that's good. What about you, Tony?
No, it's it. Same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, my theology hasn't changed at seminary, I don't think, either. So there's been a few passages through the years I've rethought and reconsidered, but I got a vision for church planting in seminary before there were networks that I knew about or even a mentor, and started thinking early on about planting. So it had been in my heart for a long, long time. And having the gospel at the center, having plurality of elders, being a missional church, not being overly programmed, being a church that was filled with joy. And those were things that captivated me. I wanted to be a planter that was calm and joyful, and I felt like that was one who the Lord had kind of made me to be. But I also thought people need that. When they're anxious, they need somebody calm, and when they're down, they need somebody joyful. So there were certain attributes that I didn't even write down. It was just, I want our church to be like that. I want you to walk in and feel a sense of warmth and joy. And so those things, man, we're still having to perpetuate that vision. 14 years down, it's not like you ever get finished with this. You're constantly evaluating and celebrating.
And I want to publicly thank you for that vision, because I got to live in the shade of it, the tree you planted. And a lot of that vision came alive through our church. And it's continued. So really what God bore in you came alive in some ways through us. And
that's one of the point that I want to make with this is that a real compelling vision, you'll know that it's compelling when it grips you so much that not only 7.5 years later, you're still living it, 14, 16 years later, you're living it, but 2 years ago, I handed off the church that I planted after being there for 15 years, handed this thing off, and they're still not only living that vision, they're multiplying that vision. And what that, you really know you're a leader, that God's called you to lead when he puts something in you that is worth replicating and worth multiplying. That this vision that God gave for Tony for this church Imago Dei, he also intended it to extend into Baltimore and beyond. And those are the kind of visions we want church planners to have, not just, I had this cool idea for a cool new church here in this town, but something that really lasts longer.
Amen.
Yeah. Hey, one last nugget. Vision, so big, so important. Values, language, all of that. What is one last wisdom nugget that you would give church planters about this subject before we sign off?
I would say read widely. I mean, we've just listened to Adam quote several different people, Lencioni. I'm more in the theological, exegetical space ordinarily, but I have found great value through the years in reading quote unquote secular books on leadership. It not so much in that we're trying to replicate business models or anything, but it's more of how to be clear, how to communicate well, how to be pithy. So I would say that read widely. Maybe you're listening widely. I've loved through the years the How I Built This podcast by NPR that just talks about entrepreneurs who've started businesses. I enjoy anything that has to do with a startup. I watch, I listen to. So this will help you a lot, I think, when it comes to how to practically cast vision. So we probably have some that watch here that are already doing that. They're already very practical entrepreneurial thinkers. They need to press more into theology and exegesis, and others who kind of go the other way. So know yourself, and let's try to improve in every area.
That's really good.
Yeah, as we close, Proverbs 29:18 says, "Without vision, the people perish." We don't want our people to perish. And as we close, just think of vision like a mass symphony of instruments working in harmony and building something grander than a phone book of musical soloists for hire. All the various vocations and personalities and skills and ages and ethnicities in your church coming together, playing in the same melody and harmony towards one glorious end. And you get to partner with God to show them the rhythm.
That's really good. Man, thank you, brothers, for the wisdom today pouring out for church planters and church planting leaders. I believe this is going to bear a lot of good fruit. And thank you all for joining us for this episode of the New Churches Podcast. As always, if you have enjoyed this podcast, consider liking it, sharing it, subscribing to whatever platform you found us on, and make sure to join us next time as we continue to discuss the same gospel and new churches.